So today we're looking at something called composite functions. That's where you combine two or more functions together. They're written like this, where you sort of put the two or more letters together. So read out loud, evaluate fg of 4. Okay? And when you see these two letters together, actually we have to do it in a specific order, and it's the one that's closest to the bracket first. So evaluate fg of 4 means do g first and then do f to that answer. So we'll do that in our heads first of all, but then I'll show you like how I want you to write it out. So in our heads, do g first. Well, g of 4, 4 squared is 16, take away 6 gives us 10. So when you do g, you get 10 as the output, and that becomes the input for this one. So we do f of 10, 2 lots of 10 is 20, add 5, so we get 25. So we know the answer is 25, we did it in our heads. But here's how I'd like you to write it out, please. Fg of 4 means do f to whatever g of 4 is. Okay, that might look more complicated, but this is how I want you to write it out. So fg4, yes, it means do g first and then f, but another way of interpreting that, and perhaps a better way of interpreting it, is do f to whatever g of 4 is. And then I can carry on. Now g of 4, well, g of 4, 4 squared 16, so that's 10, and then f of 10 is 2 times 10, add 5 is 25. So something like that. You could put even more steps in here if you like. You could say it's 2 times 10, add 5, and so on. But that's roughly how I want you to lay it out. Now suppose I did gf of 4 instead. I'm not actually expecting to get the same answer, and if I did, it's a coincidence. So let's evaluate gf of 4. 4 is just a random number. Well, gf of 4 means do g to whatever f of 4 is. Okay, now f of 4, 2 times 4 is 8, add 5 is 13. And now I've got to do g. We're doing g is squaring and taking away 6. So g of 13, 13 squared is 169, take away 3, so 163, I reckon. You might think, well, why lay it out like this? Surely it's easier to just here do the f first and then the g, and up here do the g first and then the f. There is a reason for it, and it's because it's much easier with this layout when you're doing it with algebra. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So this is an example of the composite functions question, but we're doing it with algebra and we're not putting any numbers in. So find a simplified expression for fg of x. Well, recall then that fg of x means that we want to do g first, so it's do f to whatever g of x is. So this means do f to whatever g of x is. Well, doing f is doubling the input and adding 5. Okay, doing f is doubling the input and adding 5. So let's do f to g of x. Let's double the input, it's 2 lots of g of x, and now let's add 5. This is the point that I would replace g with its definition if I were you. So the definition of g is x squared minus 6, so it's 2 lots of x squared minus 6. The question wanted a simplified expression, and if you expand this, we get 2x squared minus 12 plus 5, minus 12, add 5 is minus 7, so 2x squared minus 7. And we've done that. That's our simplified expression for the composite function fg of x. The steps again then were to say that fg of x means do f to g of x, but doing f is just doubling and adding 5. So that's exactly what we've done. I've kept the g of x here on this next line. It's clear to see that's the input for the f. And then I've replaced g with this definition. If you replace g of x with x squared minus 6 at this stage, it can get a little confusing. It's still completely correct. I would recommend this is the right time to do it. So I'll now show you what happens if it's the other way round. So in this case, find gf of x. Well, gf of x means that we've got to do g to whatever f of x is. Do g to whatever f of x is. Now, doing G just means that you square the input and take away 6. So when you do G, no matter what the input is, you square that input and take away 6. It just so happens that the input for G this time is this function itself. So let's do G to f of x. That's going to be f of x squared, take away 6. Now the definition of f of x is 2x plus 5. So that's 2x plus 5 squared, take away 6. And I can now do the simplification for this. So that's going to give us 4x squared. 2 5s are 10, but there'll be 2 of those. So 20x plus 25, take away 6. Feel free to take your time over this, do FOIL properly. I've got years of experience and can do them in my head, but you're very welcome to write out 2 sets of brackets there and take your time. This simplifies slightly because 25 take away 6 is 19. So 4x squared plus 20x plus 19. That's our simplified expression for gf of x. Notice that fg and gf are not normally the same answer. It can, for some coincidental examples, it can happen, but normally they're not the same thing. My last couple of examples then. I've got 2 new functions, p and q. Let's find the composite functions pqx and also qpx. You won't necessarily always be asked for both, you might just be asked for one of these in an exam question, but I'll do both just so you can see more examples. Don't worry too much about the colours. I've just sort of suggested that when the input is x, you get an x here. When the input is x, you get an x here. I might refer to the colours later on. Okay, pqx. Well, pqx means do p to whatever q of x is. That's what we've got to do. Now, doing p involves taking the input away from 17. So when I do p, that's going to give me 17 take away the q of x. Take away whatever the input is. Doing p, take the input away from 17. But I know the definition of q of x is this thing up here, the square root of 3x minus 1. So it's 17 minus square root 3x minus 1. If we could simplify that, we would. I'm not sure that does simplify any more pleasantly than what we currently have. So I'll leave it like that. For qp of x, that means that I've got to do q to whatever p of x is. Doing q is a little bit more complicated. That's times by 3, take away 1, then square root the answer. So I would have to do the square root of 3 lots of p of x, take away 1, when that's the input to the function q. Now the definition for p of x is 17 minus x. So next step, let's just replace p of x with its definition. And now I just simplify that. So by expanding the brackets in here, 3 17s, if there are any darts players out there, triple 17 is 51. 3 lots of minus x minus 3x, take away 1. And 51 take away 1 can be simplified to 50. So 50 take 3x is going to be my final simplified answer. So when you see 2 letters next to each other like this, it's probably better to just switch it to this alternative notation. So qp of x means do q to whatever p of x is. Okay, that's how I would approach these. Good luck.